For Crema Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dlamini. Author and personality Sam Cowan joins me to discuss her latest book, From Whiskey to Water. The book entails your struggles with alcoholism. You said your secret stopped being a secret when your daughter Genevieve, who was 8 at the time, told her friend that you drank lots of wine. Was that your wake-up call?
No, at that stage I had been sober for 13 years and I just hadn't told people about it. My family knew, so it was more private than public because I hadn't talked about it in the public eye before. And I was driving her home with her friend and she turned to her friend and she said, "You know what, Bella?" She said, "My mom used to drink a lot of wine." And I just froze in the car because we'd always told the kids that Mommy has a drinking problem, Mommy's allergic to alcohol. When Mommy has a drink, it's not the same as if Daddy has a drink. But we left out all the other stuff. You know, Mommy used to sometimes wake up in her car and that Mommy sometimes didn't remember what she'd done the day before. So when she said that to Bella, I kind of just froze. And then Bella said to her, "But how much did she drink?" So Jen was like, "Oh," she goes, "just so much, just tons." And then she said, "And if she'd carried on drinking, she would have been born stupid. My brother would have been born stupid." He said, "and when we could call him stupid and it would be true." And the two of them just laughed. And I thought, she obviously knows more about it than I realized. So I spoke to my husband and I said, "How much have you told her?" He said, "I don't know." But she was going to find out eventually anyway. So that's how it started. That was how the book began, because I thought I didn't want to be someone's show and tell. I wanted to tell the children in school. I'd rather get it out myself. Kind of like a press statement from a government ministry.
Who is Sam Cowan?
Wow, I think she changes, you know, I feel strange talking about her in the third person. So when I was younger, I was a hard-drinking, hard-bitten journalist, and then I was a mom, and I was much softer, but by then I'd stopped drinking. And then I was a great, big, fat, happy person, and then I was a swimmer. But I think there are certain things that always stay the same. So I've always been an anxious person. I'm still an anxious person. I've always tried to manage it and generally failed. I suppose Sam is pretty much the same as everybody else. You know, it's a world that we walk through. And I think it was Das Ram who said, in the end, we're all just walking each other home.
You always refer to yourself as an alcoholic, even though you have recovered. Why is that?
Because I don't think you're ever not an alcoholic. You're always recovering. So even now, 14 years, 10 months on, every now and again I still want to drink. And that, for me, is the difference between someone who drinks heavily and someone who's an alcoholic. Because I haven't had any alcohol in all this time. But every now and again I'll see a glass of wine go past on a tray, or somebody will have one at the table, and I think, oh, that would just be lovely. And I just can't risk it. And I think that if I did have one drink, it wouldn't just be one. So I think to say that I've fixed it or that I've overcome it would be a lie. And I think it would be the first step back into that abyss. I really do.
How were you able to perform well at work while you were struggling with alcohol addiction?
So I'm what's called a high-functioning alcoholic, where we can hold down jobs and do really well, and most people don't know there's a problem. So I was never drunk at work. I never drank at work. And even when there was a staff function, I might have one glass of wine or two, but then I wouldn't drink anymore because I didn't want to be like those people, you know, the ones who got drunk at the office party. I might have had a hangover at work, but I never talked about it. I never drank at lunch unless someone else was drinking, and I didn't drink every single day of the week. So I kept it pretty tight. I never took time off work because I was drinking either. But having said that, there are 20 questions that you answer to find out whether or not you're an alcoholic. And they say, if you answer yes to more than 2, you have a drinking problem. And I answered yes to 15. But of the 15, none of them related to work. I'd never taken time off. I'd never stolen. I'd never done a less than good job. So that's how I did it.
How was the reaction from your family and friends when they heard about this book?
I checked with my family, you know, with my husband. I even checked with the kids. At the end, I said, these are the stories I'm going to tell. And my son said, well, are we in this book? And I said, yes, you are. And he said, and is it funny? I said, some of it's very funny. And then my daughter said, but is it like a drama? So I said, yes, baby, it's just like a drama. And she said, okay, well, you can write it. She said, but then you must tell everyone that I have long, beautiful hair and green eyes. And she does. So I do. In terms of friends, a lot of them knew the stories. I don't think many people who knew me were that shocked. There were a few people who I thought knew everything who phoned up and said we had no idea. And I think certainly from a work perspective, most people had no idea. So there was more, and it was interesting because I've known for so long, it never occurred to me that other people wouldn't know. Like, you know, when you're giving someone directions to your house and you leave out something really obvious, and it's because you know how to get there, but you forget to tell that person that that road is now closed off, so they need to go another way. I think it was like that.
Can you share how it was like when you first attended the AA meetings?
So the first meeting I went to was the last day I had a drink. And I remember sitting on the bricks on the driveway crying while my husband stood there saying, tell me what to do. Just tell me what to do. And I was covered in vomit, so I knew I'd thrown up on myself, but I didn't know if it was in the car or in the, in the garage. I had no idea. And I said to him, I need to go to AA right now. And we knew a friend who was a recovering alcoholic, and she took me to my first meeting. And I remember sitting there in this meeting, looking at all these different people. And some were like me, and some looked like they'd just come out of the office, and some looked like they'd come out of a motorcycle gang. And there were young people and old people, white, black. It was a pretty even spread between men and women. And I just thought, you'd never know. If you went past this, it could be a church meeting, it could be a body corporate meeting. You would never know. We were all the same. And so I found comfort in that there was no there's no uniform, there's no one fits all. And I took comfort in that. I'd always felt out of place my whole life. And when I was drinking, I felt like I had a home. And then when I was sober, I felt like I had a home.
What would you say to someone who is struggling with alcohol addiction?
It's interesting you asked me that, because about 3 weeks ago, somebody that I knew, but I didn't know had an alcohol problem, asked if we could go for coffee. So we went for coffee. And they started telling me how they know they need to stop drinking, but they can't, but they think they could get it under control, but they're not sure. And I said, this conversation is a waste of my time. I said, we can talk about family and friends and stuff, but in terms of not drinking, this is a waste of my time because you're not ready. And so when somebody says, I think I have a drinking problem, once you've said that, you already know. I don't have to check you. It's like if I say, do you think I've put on weight? I already know that I have. What I'm really saying is, do you see it? And so it's not as though I'm really checking to say, have I put on weight? Because you know you have. And it's the same with being an alcoholic or having a drinking problem. You know you have.
You once said you will never be in a position to help an alcoholic addict. Why is that?
I won't be in a position to sponsor anyone. And the reason for that is, as a sponsor, somebody else becomes your concern. And I've got 2 children and they're my concern. And I would not be able to drop everything for somebody. I wouldn't be able to be phoned in the middle of the night. I just don't have the capacity for that, because my kids, Chris and Jen, they come first and second. So, and I've got to concentrate on my own sobriety. And I think that's more helpful. People say, what's more important, your kids or your sobriety? And I say my sobriety, and they're quite shocked. And I go, I can't be a good mother if I'm not a sober mother.
Who should be reading this book?
You know what's been a surprise for me, but a really lovely one, was a lady came up to me, funny enough, in a toilet, and said to me, I bought your book, and I gave it to my husband. And she said she'd been sober for 14 years. And her husband had been supportive and wonderful, but she said he never understood. And she said, please read this, because it was like you were in my head. And I was so touched. And a lot of people have said to me that it's not even for the alcoholic in them, it's for their families. And that's helped. I didn't expect that or think of that when I wrote it. Mm-hmm. So I think that's who this book has turned out to be for, strangely enough, is families and friends, to maybe say this is why people are the way they are when they drink, and that it's a sickness, and they have to manage it.
The title says From Whiskey to Water. Does this mean you don't touch alcohol at all?
Not at all. Not at all. In fact, the other day, I was invited out to dinner, and the pudding was tiramisu. And I didn't even think twice. I said, yeah, I'll definitely have that. And of course, it's full of Kahlua. And I had half a spoonful. I was like, I can't eat this now. I just can't. It's too dangerous. I could feel that alcohol hit the roof of my mouth, and I literally spat it into my napkin. I said, I can't. It's delicious. I would love to eat it and then drink the rest of the Kahlua, but I can't. Absolutely not.
This is your 3rd book related to your life. Why is it so important for you to share your life with other people?
This one I was asked to do by quite a few people, but I think when I talk about my life, I think probably I don't have enough of a filter. I don't cut off enough, Because even when I wrote about postnatal depression, people kept saying, yeah, I felt like that. And, I didn't know other people felt like that. And I think there are certain stigmas around certain disorders. Like postnatal depression is a sickness. It doesn't mean you're a weak mom. And I think that was important to write about. And this, alcoholism, is a stigma. And I think to say, you don't have to be on the street drinking out of a brown paper bag. You can be a fully functioning human being walking around and still have a problem.
Your book is funny even though it's about a serious subject. Why was it so important for you to address it in a funny way?
It's how I talk. It's how and some of it is funny, unfortunately. I mean, there's one story which is quite tragic but very funny, where I'd been sober for about 12 years. And I was sitting at a table like this with about 5 or 6 other women. And we were all talking. One of the ladies' friends had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and had been given 2 weeks to live. It was a huge shock, and we were all talking about what we'd do if we had 2 weeks to live. And I said straight away, I'd go to the bottle store. And I thought, that's amazing. I'll go and drink until I die, because then I'll have paid my debt. I'll have been a good mom, I'll have been a good wife. I won't have to be vigilant anymore. And it just sounded so great. And the more I talked about it, the more excited I got. And eventually I realized all the other people at the table were just looking at me with these frozen faces. And the one lady said, but Sam, what about your family? And I hadn't thought about them at all. I'd only thought about myself. And it was such a shock to realize that even then I didn't feel bad. I was just angry. And that's kind of funny and weird and strange all at the same time, because it's wrong. And I know it's wrong. But that's kind of the hilarity of the whole thing, that you carry on knowing that you're weird and different. But it just is life.
How was the reaction from your kids after reading the book?
My son's read it. He says some of it's very funny and some of it's very sad. My daughter's 9, so she only knows a couple of things. But I made sure the stories I picked were stories I could explain later, because it's an iceberg. There's so much stuff you don't remember or people remind you of. And that's not appropriate. And it's not fair to my family either. So Chris thinks it's hilarious, but also quite frightening. And I wanted Chris to read it because he's 13 years old. And that's around the time that these kids start seeing alcohol. And it's harder for them than it was for us, because in my day, alcohol wasn't very nice when you were a kid, and now everything's sugary and it's like Coke with a kick. So I said, you need to read this so you can know that these were the triggers, that these are the things that set me off. And so if you do drink with your friends, he's like, no, I'm not going to drink with my friends. I said, one day you are. Maybe not this year, maybe not even next year, but one day you will. And I want you to know these are the things you have to be aware of, because you could end up like me. Hopefully not.
That was author and personality Sam Cohen speaking to Creamer Media's Polity about her latest book, From Whiskey to Water.